Welcome back to part three of this story of one Croydon family's service during the Second World War. This is the story of Peggy Weight. She was a writer in the Supply and Secretariat branch of the Women's Royal Naval Service. Peggy was born on the 28th of February 1923 at number 2 Salisbury Road, Croydon. She was a non-identical twin of her brother Wally. We don't know a lot about her pre-war work employment, but we do know that she spent some time as a postwoman and also delivering milk from a horse and cart. It kind of figures these were pre-war jobs. Wanting to make a greater contribution to the war, Peggy volunteered to join the Women's Land Army, and she did this in March 1941 at the age of 18. A couple of photos of Peggy there. Women were initially asked to volunteer to serve in their life. From December 41, they could also be conscripted. At its peak, there were some 80,000 women in the Land Army. There's no record of where Peggy served, but these ladies could be drafted anywhere, mostly working in the fields. I guess Peggy wanted to do something a little more glamorous. To that end, she decided to join the Women's Royal Naval Service. In 1943, Peggy left the Land Army and joined the Wrens. Peggy's service started in 22nd December 1943 when she arrived at Mill Hill, the initial training centre in London, otherwise known as HMS President 3. There she and several hundred other new recruits were rounded up and taken to a large modern building shaped like an elongated X and topped with a bright green copper roof. It had been designed for the Medical Research Council by the architect Maxwell Ayrton, best known for the nearby Wembley Stadium. But now it was the Wren's basic training depot. And like all shore establishments in the Navy, the facility was named after a ship. Here's a few photographs from inside. That was the bottom right-hand side, or the right-hand side is the assembly area. As you can see, the Wrens and the Quans are in the assembly. From their arrival, the girls were best known as pro-Wrens, probationary, and were given bluette overalls. As an example, there's a lass on the bottom left there is scrubbing the deck. A garment only worn for the first few days. Then it was medical checks, including hair search for head lice, and that apparently upset quite a few. Then a meal, which was traditionally bangers and mash with a cup of very thick ship's cocoa, known in the Navy as Kai. Bedding had to be drawn, then off to accommodation. Latterly, she was given a full kit issue and some clothing coupons, most of which went on black silk stockings. Although it was mandated that Wrens wore black stockings, they were never issued, so it was standard that they would use it in that day. Basic training in those days lasted a fortnight. Almost everything about life in the Wrens was built around the naval template, which included history of the Navy, seams knots, drill, language, ship's watches, and so on. After basic training, she was quickly drafted to learn her trade. Her posting was to Staines. Peggy was attached to a group which carried out censorship duties. This involved reading every letter which came into London. When the recipient of the letter received it, there may have been portions of text struck out. If it felt it was contained some sort of information that would harm the war effort. Peggy would have taken part in Peggy's time in the censorship world. She would have been a part of a section of about 20 Wrens. They would have cut out masses of dialogue in letters because anything which was doubtful wasn't allowed to be mentioned. So it might have been the name of a ship or the name of a regiment, But most of what was seen was just natter and chatter and nothing of any real interest. The photograph on the left there is Peggy in the middle. The chap on the left is Wally, a twin brother, and by looking at his formation patches, the chap on the right is one of Wally's mates from the regiment. On the 5th of June 1944, Peggy was promoted to HS, the highest specialised rate. And on the 22nd of February 45, she was drafted to Lock U. It was a combined operation base and convoy assembly point. HMS Helicon was the collective name for a number of small Royal Navy stations, including a military camp, which was situated on the shore of Lock U. The main depot consisted of a pier, slipway, and many buildings. During World War II, it was linked closely to the maintenance of anti-submarine booms. Submarine nets were placed across the mouth of Loch Ewe at this point to protect the gathering convoys that used the loch as a safe haven. The roles of the Wrens were quite diverse and included office, admin, telephonists, stewards, cooks, teleprinter operators, and much more. Peggy would have worked in an office conducting admin duties. Loch Ewe was a hive of activity. 3,000 personnel were stationed at its peak in the defence of the anti-submarine nets of the convoys. There was also a magnetic loop across the mouth of the loch to the command bunker, and nowhere was unaffected, which must have come as quite a shock to local crofting and fishing communities. In the picture, there's a few images. The bottom one in black and white, that is the boom at Loch Ewe at the time, and the little map on the left-hand side gives you an indication of the different stations that there were, and the defensive measures that were used to protect the ships. Initially, Peggy was working in Hawke Bay or Mellon Charles or both. Partway through her time, she transferred to the command bunker. The sole purpose of this bunker was to coordinate and organise incoming and outgoing convoys. It would also be responsible for fueling and supply of victuals and stores. The community within the bunker would have been completely self-contained, able to withstand periods of isolation from the outside world. It had a NAFI, full ventilation and filtering systems, air conditioning, backup batteries and generators. The double steel blast doors front and rear were protected by a open-sided concrete blast walls. There's an example of one there. In May 1945, the last ship was sunk in the Atlantic, and with the surrender of Germany, the Battle of the Atlantic was over. Peggy celebrated by getting married to her husband, Aubrey Haslow, and they got married in Croydon in May of that year. Aubrey was also in the Royal Navy. We suggest that they probably met at Loch Ewe. The base itself remained in operation throughout and beyond August, where the surrender of Japan brought the Second World War to an end. Loch Ewe was and remains MOD property, and is still used today as a Royal Navy fueling depot. Peggy was demobbed from the Wrens directly from HMS Helicon on the 18th of September 1945. As a Class A reserve, she would have been offered all sorts of vocational and educational courses. We're not sure whether she did any or not. And she'd have had, of course, her exit interview with a senior naval officer. The defence medals are shown on this slide, and she was released on reserve on the 9th of April 1956. And at that time, her address was listed by the War Office as the 29 Davison Road, Croydon. Not long after leaving the service, Peggy and Aubrey moved to Dominion Road, 37 Dominion Road, Addiscombe, where on the 14th of April her son was born. One thing that Peggy used to say, they never took any German prisoners. This probably stems from her time at Loch Ewe. The Russian convoys had a torrid time. There were huge Allied losses. Sailors in the water had very little chance of survival. Often the seas were too rough, or the threat of U-boat attack too great. Possibly Allied sailors were disinclined to rescue German survivors, aircraft or U-boat, having witnessed the fate of their own.